Today's lesson continues what we were talking about yesterday. It's very similar in style, it's just that it's a different method for you. So ultimately you'll be able to choose, do you want to use the percent proportion that we talked about yesterday or the percent equation that we're talking about today. If you are following along in your notes packet, this is found on page number 8 for today. So if you are liking to follow along and you want to write these down, that's fine. Otherwise, just jotting a couple examples in your notebook is fine. So another way to work with our percents is to think about it as a math equation. You'll need to think about keywords to help you. So here's a couple examples. So these are similar to what we saw yesterday. What number is 50% of 6? Now in math class, you need to remember that what number would signal to you that we're solving for something, that we have a variable. Is signals that we have an equal sign. 50%, before we can use percents in this case, we're going to actually have to change them to decimals. The word of is going to remind us to multiply. So putting this together, we have x, what number, is equals 50%, 0.5 or 0.50 of means to multiply 6 times 6. So in this case, we would have x equals 0.5 times 6, so x would be equal to 3. Okay, in the next example, we have 3 is what percent of 6? Is signals an equal sign. What percent means that's what we're solving for, and x. Of means to multiply by 6. 3 equals x times 6, which we would really write as 3 equals 6x. We would solve for x here, and we would end up getting x equals 0.5, but our question said what percent, so we would have to change that decimal into a percent. In the next example, 3 is 50% of what number? Is means an equal sign. Percent changes to a decimal, of means to multiply, and what number is telling you that we have an x there. And then you'd solve the equation. So in example number 1, what number, that tells me I have an x, is equals 12%, I'm going to need to change to a decimal, of multiply 150. So my equation here is x equals 0.12 times 150. So when I go ahead and actually multiply, I don't really have anything to solve here, but I'm going to end up with 18. So that tells me that 18 is 12% of 150. In example number 2, 21 is equals what percent, there's my x, of times 40. So 21 equals x times 40, which I'm going to really write as 40x. Solving my equation, I'm going to divide by 40 so that I can isolate my variable. And I get 0.525 equals x. But keep in mind that this particular question said to me what percent. So I need to, unfortunately in this situation, remember that my answer is a decimal. So this actually becomes, boop, boop, move it 2 places over, 52.5%. And that is actually my final answer then. Go ahead, try number 3. See if you can come up with the equation first. It's going to ask you to select an equation, and then it's going to ask you to go ahead and solve. So your correct equation here, 13 is 26% changes to a decimal of what number? So times x. On both sides, you're going to divide by 0.26. And you're going to get x equals 50. So 13 is 26% of 50. In example 4 and 5, these are your word problems for today. A survey found that 25% of young adults gave up their home phone and only use a cell phone. 3,264 people only use a cell phone. So that number is the 25% who gave it up and only have the cell phone. So 3,264 is 25% of the whole group that was surveyed. And the question is asking us how many people are actually in that group. So we're basically saying instead of the group, we're going to say of what number. So if we write our equation here, 3,264 is means equals 25%, 0.25 of what number? So times x. If I divide by 0.25 here, I get 13,056 equals x. So there were 13,056 people surveyed. I think the word problems are the hardest, but if you can figure out which piece is which, that's kind of what makes it a little bit easier. I also find that I tend to use proportions for the word problems because it's easier for me sometimes when I think real life to think part over whole. So example 5, a local bakery sold 60 loaves of bread in one day. That's a total number, okay? So that is going to be basically my of number. And then it says 65% were sold in the afternoon. So how many loaves were sold in the afternoon? 65% of them were sold in the afternoon, and we want to know. So we want to know what is 65% of 60. So x, what is, equals 65% as a decimal times 60. So all I have to do here is multiply those, and I get 39 loaves. And that's it for your final lesson before break for this time around. So we're talking about the percent equation. When we come back, our next lesson is going to be kind of a review of using the proportion versus the equation and kind of comparing the two. And that'll help you to make your choice about which one you prefer.